This is not going to surprise you if you've listened to this podcast before, but I ain't the smartest man in the room, and I'm definitely not the smartest man on this podcast. In fact, I love hearing so many stories of people who have either researched things well, had incredible experience that they can share their insight, their wisdom. One of the world's top scientists joins us today. He's a professor of chemistry, professor of material science and nanoengineering. He's going to talk about how faith and science do work together. In fact, they beautifully complement each other. Dr. James Tour is my guest. Just before we get into that today, would you like, rate, review, follow the show? All of those things help us get the word out further. It's free to do all of those things. We just love sharing these stories with as many people as possible. Let's get stuck into this conversation now. James, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, better take us through, what is nanoengineering? I actually do know the other things there, but nanoengineering, can you help us understand what that is?
So nanoscience is the study of small things. Nanoengineering is taking those small things and trying to have them work collectively for a particular function.
Love that. And I'm guessing as technology has continued to advance, we've got an understanding of more and more smaller things that could potentially connect together.
Yes. They're actually already in a lot of markets. It's not always advertised because sometimes people are a bit cautious or wary of nanotechnology, so you just call it new and improved because it's just doing great things. And so sometimes it's just a marketing decision on whether to say that there's nano inside.
Love that. Before we actually get stuck into a bit of your story as well, you've actually got quite a bit of an influence in the Australian culture as well, in terms of a number of products and various things have had your involvement that are actually running here in Australia, and even in the stock exchange here in Australia and things like that too. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, love that. How did you get involved with the Australians? Yeah.
Well, we have 3 companies that we've started on the ASX, on the Australian Stock Exchange, and usually it's technology that's come out of my laboratory, and I had some Israeli financiers and Israeli investors, and they had a lot of Australian contacts, interestingly enough, and decided to take these companies on the market, on the public markets, through reverse mergers with companies in Australia, because there were several Australian investors that came on board with them as well. And so the 3 companies are Weebit Nano, which is electronic memory. Another one is DOTZ, D-O-T-Z, which is graphene quantum dots, graphene materials, and also CO2 capture. And the third one is a recent one that we started with a reverse merger, and it's MTM Critical Metals. And where they licensed our technology, we did a reverse merger, took it public like that, and it's actually done very well. I think it's up since March of 2024, it's up like 600 or 700%, so it's done real well.
We're having a chat to Dr. James Tour on Towards Understanding. Now, you tend to like going by Jim, is that correct?
That's fine. Yeah.
All right, excellent. We'll make sure we do that. Let's go back all the way to your first interest in chemistry and sort of this nanoengineering, what became these sorts of areas. Was that something that you were always fascinated about as a kid, Jim, or was this something that sort of grew as you went through school?
I would say the latter, that it grew as I went through school. I was just a pretty normal student, pretty average student, and I started to really excel more in high school, but it was when I went to college that I got saved. I come from a Jewish home in New York City, just north of the city, and I got saved. I grew up just north of the city. I got saved at the age of 18, shortly after going to college as a college freshman, and that really changed the trajectory of my life. I wanted to actually become a New York State trooper, which is a policeman, a state policeman, and but it turned out I couldn't get into the academy because I was colorblind. I'm colorblind, and so my dad's. I decided to study forensic science, and my dad said, "Well, why don't you just get a degree in chemistry, and then you can specialize after that." And it was amazing because I was 17 when I was deciding on what I was going to do, and I took my father's advice at the age of 17, which I'm pretty proud of myself that I did that,
Yeah.
and I'm glad I did, because once I got saved, I mean, my perspective started to change, and then I took organic chemistry in my sophomore year and really loved it, and decided to become an organic chemist, and then since I got saved in the university, I had a real a good feeling about the university environment, so I just always stayed in the university. I went at the age of 18, and I've never left.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that phrase, sort of getting saved, and my understanding is you're talking about that acceptance of Jesus, and so this understanding that you're saying, hey, look, Jesus, I believe, is God. He died on the cross, rose again, and I'm going to follow him, and would be known as, I suppose, a Christian. Is that a fair summary of what you're meaning by that phrase?
Yeah. I mean, it was. Yes, it was. What happened was, so I came from this Jewish home. I started having a discussion with a guy in the laundry room in August of my freshman year. I'd only been on campus a couple of weeks, and I asked him what he wanted to do when he graduated. He was a year older than me. He was in his second year, and he said he wanted to become a missionary. And I had never met a missionary before. I didn't know missionaries existed. I really didn't. I thought the American Indians had killed them all off. I didn't know that they were around. And so he said, "Can I give you an illustration of the gospel?" Again, I didn't know what he meant. And he gave me the gospel message. And I was deeply convicted at a certain point along that message. He showed me a verse in the Bible, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." And I said, "I'm not a sinner." I mean, I didn't feel like a sinner. I told him I never robbed a bank. I never killed anybody. How could I be a sinner? Then he turned to Matthew 5:28 and said, Jesus said, "I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." And I was deeply convicted by that verse. I mean, number one, I was 18. Number two, I was addicted to pornography from the age of 14. I started working in gas stations in New York City, just outside the city on the highway, and I found these magazines, and I was deeply just drawn to this stuff, and it was controlling my life in many ways. But back then, we didn't share our weaknesses with people. I never told anybody, and now I'm reading this verse, and Jesus' words, the words of Jesus, have enormous power over people when Jesus is trying to get their attention, and it just really shook me. I felt arrested in my heart, and so he had my attention, and he took me through the gospel message. It wasn't at that point, but it was 3 months later. I was in my room. 2.5 months later, I was in my room all alone, and I got on my knees and I said, "Lord, forgive me, because I am a sinner." I mean, something that was very strange for a Jewish person to do, and I felt this enormous peace just drop over me, and this burden of sin that I had been carrying just lifted from me. And then all of a sudden, to my right, Jesus is standing, but it wasn't an optical thing. It's not something I'm seeing or hearing. It's just the sense of his presence was so strong. I was already on my knees. I turned, I put my face to the ground, and it was like gush of love being poured over me, and kindness, and it went on for minutes. It wasn't just for a second, and I was just weeping. When I got up, I couldn't stop thinking about Jesus. I mean, I was dreaming about Jesus at night. At night, I was even dreaming about telling people about Jesus. I mean, this is a strange thing for a Jewish kid to be dreaming about telling people about Jesus, but that's what happened. It was a prophetic dream. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what my life has been. I'm always telling people about Jesus now. And the guy, I didn't even know what happened. The guy saw me, who had shared with me back in August. He saw me walking in the floor of the dormitory there, and he said, "Jim, have you received Jesus in your heart?" I said, "I think I have. Why do you ask?" He said, "You haven't stopped smiling for weeks." And I said, "How can I stay close to God like this?" He said, "If you read your Bible every day, you'll stay close to God. If you don't, you won't." So I've read my Bible every day, every day for the last 47 years. I mean, when I had COVID, when I had the flu, when I had the operations, I mean, every time, every day, I've read the Bible, and I've stayed close to God, and that's my story.
Yeah, I love that. Many would potentially hear your story, Jim, and go, okay, so you just talked about this experience that of, something that you sensed, that you felt that wasn't visually there, but there was a sense of it. And yet here you are, a professor of chemistry, material science, nano engineering. You've published hundreds of publications. I think you were named at one point one of the world's most influential scientific minds. Do they not go together? Do you have people sort of question that aspect? And how do you, I suppose, go, right, I'm going to put these things that are very material and they're things I can understand from a scientific point of view with something that is, much more ethereal in what you've just described. How do you, I suppose, explain those together?
Well, the Christian message, the message of Jesus Christ, is based on historical fact. A man named Jesus was crucified. He was buried, and he rose from the dead. He appeared to his disciples. He appeared to people who were indifferent, and he appeared to his enemies as well. And if you go to any academic institution in the United States, or I'm pretty sure anywhere in the world, and if you look at this academically, you go to the religion department, no matter what the background is of the professor there, academically, they will all agree on certain points. And that is that there was a man named Jesus that died by crucifixion. Some say that is actually the most well-documented fact of that era, because there's so much written about that. Number two, that the disciples of Jesus asserted that Jesus rose from the dead and had appeared to them, and they so strongly believed that they died for that assertion. They would agree with that, and they would also agree with the fact that Jesus appeared to people who were indifferent about him, who, like his brother James, and also people who were his enemies, like Paul the Pharisee, who later became the apostle, and that he had appeared to them after he rose from the dead, and they too died for that assertion. So there is that historical evidence. There's the best historians that have ever lived, like Will Durant, says that when you read the scriptures, when you read the New Testament and the Gospels in particular, that this could not have been made up. He says that if you think that this is made up, he says, look, you think there's contradictions, they're not. They're of minutia. This is exactly how it should have been reported. If you have three people view a car accident and they all come with exactly the same message, then you know there's been collusion between them. Because you will have the same story, but it's slightly different, and that's exactly how the Gospels are presented, number one. Number two, the way it's written, you can tell that this is not made up. Will Durant said, you would have to, if in a single generation, a few meager men could have come with so compelling a story as this, could have made this up, that would be more miraculous than any miracle that was done by Jesus in the Gospels. I mean, so this is based on a historical fact that a man has risen from the dead. And so as a scientist, I'm dealing with something that's a historical fact. Now, does God intercede on the lives of people? Absolutely. Is there more to the world than just the material world? Absolutely. I mean, there are things that science cannot explain. Science does not well explain the love of one person for another. For a man for his wife, or a wife for her husband. I mean, the feelings that a person has toward their child. There are many things that go beyond the material. I mean, here every scientist now is embracing the Big Bang. I mean, you don't think that's miraculous, that from nothing everything births forth, and you have these physical constants? I mean, this is the biggest miracle ever. And then they say that we'll just give us that one miracle, which is bigger than any miracle ever, and then we'll explain everything else without a miracle. I mean, this is nonsense. So there's a lot more to the world than meets the eye, and then as far as where I am as a scientist, I mean, it doesn't surprise me in the sense that I pray, that I ask God to give me insight, give me wisdom, give me understanding. And I believe that he does. So that's kind It's kind of the way that I look at it.
We're going to be back in just a couple of moments' time here on Towards Understanding, as we do head towards a better understanding with Dr. James Tour. He's the Professor of Chemistry and Material Science, Nanoengineering at Rice University in Texas. We're going to be back in a couple of minutes' time as we talk more about some of the work that Jim does now very publicly, talking about the research, talking about the scientific evidence and how that supports this understanding of God in our world. That's on the way next here.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
One of the things, as we've been talking about in the last little while, is you have a Christian faith, you have a perspective on this world that God did create it. And yet often I know that when you have conversations, and you're doing it very much in a public space now, whether it be through YouTube clips or conversations or debates or whatever it might be, very often you're actually using arguments that are scientific. And I've actually heard you say it previously as well, where you said, look, I'm not even using spiritual arguments here to state my case. I'm just using the science. How important is that as you have conversations with people to let them understand and to see when you're talking about the science and in that perspective, to then bring somebody to an understanding of a God involvement in that?
Well, I think that what you're referring to is that when I'm speaking on the topic of origin of life,
correct.
People will accuse me of being God of the gaps, meaning I can't explain it, therefore God must have done it. And I never do that. I never use a God of the gaps argument. I'm just strictly looking at the science. I'm a chemist. I look at the science and I say your origin of life models are ridiculous. They're nonsense. They don't hold up. What we have taught children right on through advanced graduate students is that this primordial soup model, where you have a pond or a puddle somewhere and some lightning flashes and some molecules formed that way, based on a Miller-Urey experiment, but long before that it was presumed. And then those molecules came together and formed higher order structures like a cell, and then those cells formed higher order multicellular organisms, and lo and behold, you had life, and then that life came out of the pond. Actually, people don't realize it. That primordial soup model doesn't date back to Darwin. It actually dates back to the Babylonians. And out of that smelly pond also came their gods. So it has an origin that's not based in any scientific fact. There's no one's been able to reproduce anything like that. No one's ever made life in a laboratory, not even close. Not even close. In a prebiotically relevant manner, they've made almost nothing in anti-pure forms, which is what would be needed. And it's a bunch of ridiculous things. And I just keep putting it out there and showing these things. And there's none of the experts in origin of life will confront me. They will just do ad hominem attacks. They'll say, well, Jim Tour's a creationist, so we don't have to deal with him. I said, look, I haven't mentioned creation. I haven't mentioned God. I'm just talking about the science. Can you solve any of these things? And they cannot. And so it is a scam. It is a scam. We are teaching people something that we have no evidence of, and it's not just for school kids and in young people. It's even in advanced textbooks. Even in advanced courses in graduate school, they still teach this primordial soup model. So all I've been doing is saying it's a bunch of nonsense and showing why it's nonsense and how this screams out. The science itself screams out life could not have happened that way. It could not have happened that way. And so, yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah. A question I've always wanted to sort of ask in this sort of way, and to you, I think it's probably the best person to ask it to as well, Jim, is this sort of concept and idea that there is a Big Bang, if we want to refer to that in a moment. But really, I suppose what I'm trying to say is a moment where all life started. And as you've talked there about this primordial soup, that seems very far-fetched, can't be replicated, that idea. And another argument is that actually, yes, there was nothing, and then there was something, and that came from an intelligent designer, a being, a God who actually created that. And so that sort of both these arguments of a starting point can still both lead to God. In one sense, one says, well, how on earth can that actually happen? How could there even be cells or the soup or a lightning strike without someone creating it? Is there an argument that Christians perhaps should be thinking through and understanding more that actually works with the way people talk about this? And I suppose I'm saying about the speech of this rather than necessarily the science. It says, yeah, we also agree that there was a moment where everything started and this is what it was. And so you might say it's a Big Bang. We're actually saying that this is God that did that. Is there a better way that maybe as Christians we could be framing these conversations in these discussions?
Well, I'm not totally sure what you're asking me to answer, but the whole concept of the Big Bang, prior to the 1960s, in the 1950s, which is actually in my lifetime, in the 1950s, most scientists did not believe in the Big Bang theory. They believed that the universe was eternal; it has always been, and that it was this steady state theory, and it wasn't. Now people had been talking about this sort of thing through the for 50 years through the 20th century, but most scientists didn't buy it. It wasn't actually until 1964 with the measurement of microwave background radiation that substantiated the Big Bang theory that there was an origin to the universe. And it was termed the Big Bang, and the term the Big Bang theory was almost a derogatory term when it was initially proposed, saying, people mocked it. Oh, there's just a Big Bang and life came. And so then we knew that the universe had a beginning. There was a beginning to the universe, and you could track the expansion of the planets in the universe and deal with this. And so what it did is it substantiated actually what was written in the Bible, that the universe had a beginning, that in the beginning was God created the heavens and the earth. So there was this concept around which believers and people who valued the scriptures could say, yes, there is this notion that there is a bang, there was a start to this. Now, scientists would never say that there was an intelligent design behind it. They just say it just happened. There was this singularity, this point, and it just happened, as if that's somehow more satisfying than speaking of an intelligent being. But be that as it may, you're speaking about probably the same point of an instant. When it comes to life, yes, it's interesting that you would have a molecular assembly and all of a sudden that would become life. We have no idea that even if you got the molecules in the right orientation, that would spark into life. We have no idea. I mean, because you can take a cell right now and the cell can just die. And then you have most of your molecules are already still in place. Why doesn't it just pop back to life again? If that's so easy, just bring a dead cell back to life. Nobody's ever done it. And nobody's ever. So we don't even really know how to define life. What is it we've just lost if a cell dies? So there's still a lot of deep questions here and things that are hard to fathom. And that seem not to happen without some external input that we cannot define. So certain people want to say that is a Big Bang. Other people want to say it is an intelligent being behind it, and the same for life. That some people will say life was just spontaneous by itself. Well, how come that never happens around us? And then other people will say No, there had to have been some intelligence behind it. I'm not sure I answered your question, but I still am a little lost on what your question was.
Well, Jim, you did very well in deciphering everything I asked. It was exactly my question, so thank you so much. You nailed exactly what I was trying to ask. Apologies for my bundle of words that went in there. Aside from some of the origin of life questions that you get, what's the number one question that actually gets posed to you in your role that people want to know and understand about?
How can you be a scientist and also be so fervent for God? That's probably the number one question.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, because I mean, this is only a newish phenomenon, that this has been something that for sort of life over just the last little while, that these seem separate. For many, many years, for many centuries, in fact, anyone of faith and Christian and science was actually going together. So this is sort of a new phenomenon that these things shouldn't be together, right?
That is correct. I mean, some of the greatest scientists ever were men and women of great faith. So this idea that you can't have both of these functioning is actually if you look at it historically, it's odd that people would not have both of those functioning. And I've never seen the Bible contradicted by any scientific fact. Certainly, there's a lot of proposals in science that aren't fact, that are theories that contradict with the Bible, but theories change all the time, certainly on the order of decades, all the time. Look, I just gave you one theory, the steady state theory of the universe has always been here. And then in the early 1960s, particularly 1964, boom, everything changes. And that's even within my lifetime. So that I mean, complete turnaround on this thing. But there's other things. I mean, this whole Darwinian concept of very small, gradual changes over long periods of time, that was blown out of the water in 1972. Again, within my lifetime, this whole Darwinian theory changed with the work by Gould, who said that's inexistent in the fossil record. What you see in the fossil record is dramatic changes over very small periods of time throughout the fossil record, and which is actually more consistent with a biblical account of things. So again, what killed off the dinosaurs? It was believed to be climate change, and then in the 1980s, I believe it was 1980, the Alvarez hypothesis. No, it was a meteorite that hit at the Yucatan Peninsula, threw the dirt into the air, obscured the sun, and all the plants died, the herbivores died, and so the carnivores then died, and that wiped out the dinosaurs. So that's the Alvarez hypothesis. So hypotheses change all the time. Even what you and I learned in school of random mutation and natural selection accounting for the diversity of life, that's changed now. It's actually the change to the universal, the theory of universal common descent, and neutral drift. Neutral drift being the small changes that occur from a parent to a child, and then to their child and to their child. So theories are changing all the time. Those may contest with the Bible, but actual facts don't contest with the Bible at all.
Jim, we've taken up lots of your time. One final question from me as we head into thinking about the next stage. You've been working in the fields of chemistry and all of those around it, and been doing that for so long. You've had, as we said, this sort of very public perspective of saying, let's talk about these things. We asked then, what's the number one question you get asked? What do you think the number one question in your field that you are such an expert in over the next 10 years will be the top question that will be asked? Is there an understanding of what that big question might be that's being asked?
Well, there's several big questions. I mean, I've alluded to some of them. I mean, first of all, where does life come from? That fundamental question is really being called into question right now. People had these silly little models, and now that's being called into question. Those don't work. Another big question is consciousness. Is consciousness really a matter of the tissue within your skull, in your brain? Or is there something outside? Is the mind really something extend outside your cranium, your skull? And is there more to that? And there seems to be more to that. So these are questions that are really bringing on these changes. These sorts of questions. These are big questions. Are the physical constants that we say the constants of the universe, are they really constant? Have they never changed since the Big Bang? Or are they changing, seasonally? Are there small changes in them over time? I mean, so there's a lot of questions that continue to have to be answered here. The whole concept of mind is just really interesting. Is there something outside of my brain? And you see hints of this written in the Bible, and now you see scientists scratching their heads. Maybe there is something beyond just what's in my cranium. The mind extending beyond just the brain. So these are questions. I don't know if they're going to be answered in the next 10 years, but certainly in the next century, these are going to be really dealt with in a lot more sophisticated fashion, rather than just trying to dismiss them and saying that the whole world is material and that's all there is. I mean, that's very silly. People cannot know that. There's questions that science itself says it cannot answer, and as soon as you escape from the material world, and you say, well, this is very silly to Earth. This is why are you saying this? But scientists will say that most of matter, 70% of the matter that we have, is dark matter. That we can't see it. It may even be more than 70%. We can't detect it, but it is there. And I don't know, 50% or more of energy that's out there is dark energy. We can't even detect it. So most scientists would agree with that there's dark matter and dark energy, that between the two of them, it may be upwards of 90% of what's in our universe. And we have no ability to know or to detect it. And you say, well, why would you even think it exists? We think it exists because of difference, because if you just look at the accounting, there's something that's not there. There's a lot of things missing, and that's called the dark matter and the dark energy. And so those are not things that we can materially measure. Science can't measure those. That's why they're called dark. And so we accept it in some ways, but then in other ways we don't. So sometimes the scientific enterprise is a little bit too provincial.
Jim, it's been just wonderful having a short conversation with you. I want to direct people to your YouTube channel as well, at Dr. James Tour. There's so many videos, so many opportunities to explore different topics, different ideas. There's different debates that you've been a part of, different videos that you've shared, different topics and ideas. And so if you want to explore more of what Jim has been talking about, please make sure you do check out that as well. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing, for being willing to come on the program and start us thinking and challenging some of our thinking as well. It's been an absolute privilege. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.
Dr. James Tour, my guest here on Towards Understanding.